Welcome everybody. I'm Steve Atkins. I'm DSO Transition Manager for Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, and I'm also part of the Open Networks project. And I sit on the workstream 1A, flexibility services, and also head up workstream 3, which we're talking about today. In terms of the agenda, I'll just run briefly through the agenda. I'll carry rattling on for a couple of minutes just to introduce you to this topic, and then I'm going to hand over to Rafiq from DMV, who's going to go through the DSO roadmap, and then we'll have a Q&A session and some closing remarks. We've booked out until I think 3:30, but if we finish before then we'll definitely let you go. We won't hold you till the bitter end, but we want to get some good debate around this topic and get your views. So in terms of the DSO roadmap, this is a key product for workstream 3 this year. Started last year, and it really kind of pulls together our work on how DNOs are going to be providing DSO functions in the future. We go to the next slide. So the implementation plans are an absolutely key project deliverable. We want to set out a really clear pathway to the implementation of distribution system operation functions, and this is becoming a really key input to our ED2 business planning process. And what we want to do is give you visibility of how networks are progressing in this area, how they're meeting DSO baseline expectations as laid out by Ofgem, and really see the transition and the implementation progress. And the implementation plan provides insights into actions that have both been implemented to date, as well as in anticipated windows for future implementation. So you'll be able to kind of look to see how far we've come, and how far we've got to go, and across all of the functions that we've detailed as part of DSO. And it's a tool that you can use to identify progress, look at barriers and gaps in delivering DSO functionality. And this latest iteration of the roadmap, this is the second iteration, is a snapshot of where we are in March 2021, and we plan to update this again in Q4 2021. So you'll see an increased level of granularity, which is something you've been asking for, but we'll also just pull out the fact that when we go to Q4 2021, that granularity will increase yet again. And the two key outputs for the implementation plan is the roadmap itself, which you can interact with, and a report to support that. So the objectives today are to, really for us to run through the roadmap, listen to your views on the updates that we've made, some of which around improving its functionality, some of it obviously the content, and hear from you about how we can improve that to make it even more useful. We'd really like to know, how you're using the DSO implementation plan at the moment. Have you looked at it? Have you drilled into it? What are you interested in when you look at it? Is it just comparing DNOs? Are you looking at specific functions that you're keen to see progress on? And our focus here is to kind of get your feedback and input. So make sure you put any observations or chats in the chat box. If you want to send us links to use cases, then we'd be really keen to see those as well. So just to put this implementation plan into context, we look at the next slide. Just to kind of run through, where we've come from on this kind of DSO transition. So back in 2017 and 2018, off the back of the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan from Ofgem and BEIS, we identified some of the key functions that we thought supported distribution system operation. And I think you can see some of those reflected again in the baseline expectations that Ofgem have published earlier this year. We then looked at modelling, what those future worlds might look like in terms of the arrangement between ESO and DSO and DNO, and looked at feedback on those. We took that to an independent impact assessment, which identified that coordination between the ESO and the DNO was the best or least regrets path to pursue, and I think that's where we are now. And then in 2020 we started this process of monitoring and providing visibility of the actions to deliver that least regrets pathway in the short, medium and long term. And if we go to my final slide, just to reiterate that right the way along, that's been developed alongside stakeholders, debating with you, discussing with you, taking your feedback, good and bad, but very constructive, and kind of saying, we want to understand, what we should be doing as DNOs, which aspects of DSO operation we should be delivering, and it's been great to see, in recent months, more clarity from Ofgem on that for our ED2 work. But the input from you guys that have joined these calls and the stakeholder advisory groups been absolutely invaluable. So thank you for that, and look forward to that continued engagement in the future, and particularly on this call as we look at the DSO implementation plan. I think I'm going to hand over to Rafiq now, and he's going to take us through the latest plan.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Rafiq Versmissen. I'm a director in DNV's Energy Systems Division. And together with my colleague Angeliki Goga, I've been working with the ENA, its members, with Steve, and with most of you, I hope, on the development of the DSA roadmap and implementation plan since January of last year, January 2020. So I'll take you to sort of the update. As Steve said, we've done both sort of some functional enhancements of the roadmap, and of course the roadmap, the actual content of it, evolves over time, and so we've worked with the members to update the roadmap to reflect the latest state of affairs. But as this slide shows, I'll kick off. I appreciate that maybe not all of you on the call have consulted the roadmap before, or you may have may not immediately recollecting some of the key principles underneath the roadmap. So I'll do you a minute's worth of introduction, and then I'll take you through basically what's happened in Q1 of this year. So this slide, the one that we have on currently, really sort of provides the overview. Importantly, what I always like to draw out to people involved in this is that the roadmap is about distribution system operation. Many of you will be familiar with the DSO transition, or DNO to DSO transition, so the act by which the process through which a distribution network operator transforms or evolves itself into a distribution system operator through the use of various smart and flexible solutions. So the concept of distribution system operation is bigger than that, and reflects sort of the industry transition, not just anything that the DNOs do. Also, of course, the DNOs are sort of key to this, but it represents the collective. So the involvement of the system operator, the involvement of the transmission owners, but also the involvement of Ofgem as the regulator, BEIS as the policymaker through the Smart Systems and Flexibility Action Plan, and of course inputs from other stakeholders in the energy industry, such as yourselves, flexibility service providers, utilities, and other sort of interest groups. So the objective, as Steve has also explained, is to provide this consolidated overview of how the industry is going through this transition, The basis for it is the 8 DSO functions previously defined by the ENA Open Networks project, under which we have formulated groups of activities which consist of detailed steps, so tangible actions, solutions, processes being explored and implemented by the collective of network operators and stakeholders to deliver DSO. And as Steve has also said, the output is we have the online interactive roadmap accompanied by a detailed DSO implementation document. So 2 routes for you to get sort of all of the information that we've developed here. If I may have the next slide. So I'll start with the functional enhancements developed sort of earlier this year. They were all driven by feedback received following the original creation of the roadmap. So sort of after summer last year, we had one of these webinars and we solicited stakeholders' inputs, out of which came a number of very helpful recommendations, which I'm pleased to say we've been able to deliver. They involved the creation of a data extraction function, a functional improvement having to do with pop-up windows in the Tableau software piece to make the user experience more comfortable, I think. And we've developed a search function, and I'll show you sort of what we've done for those. So firstly, the data extraction file. So what we have done is we've created an Excel file that pulls out essentially all the information that makes up the DSO roadmap. So this is a file that will be provided alongside the online roadmap on the ENA website landing page, which is in development currently. And it will literally provide you sort of in pure form sort of all the data that makes up the roadmap for you to use, play around with, interpret in any way you like. A bit of insight. So this file, once you have access to it, it'll have 3 sheets. Will provide sort of an introduction and explain to you how to use, but also express some limitations of use in terms of the information you draw from this data. And then essentially we provide 2 tabs. One is captures the aggregated information. So you may recall that the majority of steps in roadmap are aggregated. So the delivery of a certain piece of functionality where this is delivered by multiple organizations such as DNOs in working together with ESO, working together with TOs. Then what you find the roadmap is this timeline that represents the totality of that delivery time frame. So that's in one tab, aggregated, but we also have a select number of steps where we have individual monitoring, and they have to do most especially with specific requirements coming out of ENA work for the distribution network operators. And these we provide sort of in a separate tab for you to access. And well, here you can see sort of a quick overview of the types of information that you'll be able to access. Okay, so this will be made available to you once the landing page has been created with the ENA website. I can pause, by the way, if there's any questions popping up sort of in the chat. Do remind me if that's the case, and I'll stop.
Will do. Thanks, Rafiq. No questions yet. Okay, though.
So then the other part was, maybe you can press the next button so we have the full slide. There we go. So one of the features in the Tableau software we use is that we had the roadmap, and this feature, there was this feature whereby if you hovered your mouse over sort of a certain line in the roadmap, there would be this pop-up information on the left-hand side. It's a little block with the yellow and red information in it. So honestly, this didn't provide sort of the best or the smoothest user experience because this pop-up kept sort of flip-flopping around over the screen a little bit. And so one of the pieces of feedback we've received several times actually was, Luke, this doesn't really work. And so following that, what we've done is we've made a simple enhancement of the tooling to remove this pop-up, but instead, when you click on sort of any of the lines in the roadmap, that some summary information appears underneath sort of the visualization, the time frame. And I'll illustrate sort of for all of you in a moment sort of how that has worked out. But so this was an issue that I think we've addressed. And then thirdly, a search function. So much requested, basically in the same space as the ability to download information. We've created now the functionality for users to carry out sort of an open text search of the roadmap, so that if you're interested in just in a very specific topic, you'll be able to swiftly see where and in what form and under what sort of activity or step, your search or this topic that you're after sort of appears in the roadmap. And so you can swiftly sort of drill down in this particular area of relevance, and understand sort of what any of the networks sort of are doing to deliver this piece. So what I'm going to do now is, if I can take over the presentation for a moment, I'll take us to the online roadmap, and I'll just put it on screen and illustrate how this works. So I believe I can do that now, and I should be sharing my screen. And hopefully all of you can see the online roadmap now. Maybe someone can confirm.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So this is, again, the landing page at the ENA still in development. This is sort of basically the landing within sort of the Tableau online domain. And those of you who visited the roadmap before hopefully will recognize this interface here. So I'll quickly take you through sort of the tabs, and I'll demonstrate some of the functionality. So we have an introduction page about sort of explaining sort of a bit of background around the roadmap, what it's for and what you can do with it, and giving you a route to providing feedback. There's a navigation tab. Okay, there we go. Navigation tab that sets out sort of how to navigate the roadmap and how to make the most use of the Tableau functionality. And then we have the roadmap itself, providing various views, starting with the roadmap view. So this is the highest level view of all of the activities. On the right hand side, you'll see I've quickly switched to the long-term view, giving you sort of the full sort of time frame, and you can see sort of the full time that according to the roadmap currently, sort of it takes to sort of deliver all of these 8 DSO functions in a timeline from now to January 2040. There's a function tab which allows you to zoom in at function level on the underlying activity. So you recall every function is divided into a number of activities. In this case, function 1, system coordination, is split into 5 underlying activities. And again, I've switched to the long-term view, and you can see the time frame to deliver this activity. And indeed, as I said, so rather than sort of pop-up windows, we've now created the ability, you click on sort of the timeline and pop-ups a bit of information about this activity, giving you a little bit more detail, some summary stats. And then again, we can drill down one level deeper into the activity level. Again, I'll switch to the long-term view. So again, you can select sort of the time frame that you like. In this case, function 1, system coordination, activity A, coordination with the GB system operator. I'll scroll down a little bit and you can see the full range of steps. So there's 40 steps sitting in this activity. And so you get sort of the greatest granularity view of the DSO implementation plan under this activity. Again, you're able to click on a step and you get some summary information. As well, in this case, because I've clicked on a step that has the green indicator here, this is one of the steps that has firm-specific reporting. So it's not one of the aggregated steps. This step also provides you an insight into how, in this case, each of the DNOs are performing against this step, or what their current plans are in any case. And so you can see here it's a mix of initiated and implementing, and some DNOs have sort of a time frame identified against, in this case, the activity of procuring and operating new DSO services. So that's a bit of an overview of the roadmap itself. The search function is here on the right. So the search function starts with a view that provides you literally all steps in the roadmap, and it allows you an open text search. So if I search for a term that I like, flexibility services. As you can see, now the visual returns a selection of any step that involves the term flexibility services. And so I have the ability, I have the overview of anything to do with flexibility services, and I have the ability to zoom in further. And let me do some things on the right-hand side here. Again, I'll switch to the long-term view. Actually, that is not terribly helpful on this occasion. Switch to the medium view. Now, let's say I want to find out, I want to zoom in on anything having to do with investment planning only, in which case I deselect and I tick the box investment planning. And so the roadmap now only returns those steps having to do with flexibility service under the investment planning function. And if I wanted to select even further, I can select on steps involving a specific organization type from a drop-down list here. So I select DNO, and in this case, as you can see, there's one specific steps that involves DNOs around the provision of flexibility service under the investment planning function. And the search function also allows you, again, the same functionality that you have in the main roadmap. So I can again click on this bar and get a bit of summary information about this particular step. So hopefully you'll find sort of the search tool as a useful enhancement of the online roadmap tool, and it'll allow you to swift access to any specific area of your interest. So with that, I will return to slides unless there are any questions about the online roadmap at this stage.
No questions yet.
No? In which case, I think we can return to the presentation, and then I'll run through the second part of my my update. Yes, thank you. So the second part of the update is indeed simply updating the roadmap for the latest available information. So since we created the roadmap originally in the first half of 2020, we created for the first time a vast body of activities and underlying steps, and on all of these, the relevant sort of network companies and other stakeholders took positions, provided sort of the status as at the middle of last year. But of course, things move on. So we've updated the roadmap for developments, the evolution or the progress made by network companies in delivering any of this functionality in the remainder of 2020 out to the beginning of this year. So I can have the next slide. So this slide just gives you a taste of where some of the main changes come from. So changes, again, are partly driven by the evolution progress in existing steps, but also we found new steps to be added. And this gives you a bit of an overview. So what you'll see primarily new steps under any one of the functions, they would have emerged from either, for instance, work completed by the ENA Open Networks project in the remainder of 2020, which has resulted in deliverables that may then have sort of a knock-on action or a finding or a solution or a requirement on DNOs to take away the outcome and implement or execute the outcome, which we would have then reflected in the roadmap. Typically also, what we've added is actions, developments coming out of the project initiation document released in early 2021, which sets out the next steps for the ENA Open Networks project and specifically its deliverables for the current calendar year. So those would be the two main sources. Across the functions, on some occasions, we've also found other areas to update. So for instance, under function 3, investment planning, we note that Ofgem has been looking at the development of a number of license conditions in relating to the use of network development plans, or for instance, the the enablement of the coordinated adjustment mechanism under RIO2 as a reopener mechanism. Under function 4, also there are code modifications, for instance, in relation to queue management and in relation to this of GEM's view on the distribution impact assessment. And then, well, function 5, function 8, there was no steps added, and function 6 and 7, primarily sort of new steps emerged from workstream 1A of the Open Networks project, including, for instance, the ENA-OMP's current work on finding sort of a common baseline methodology for flexibility services for networks, and its next steps in pursuing the development and delivery of a quantitative testing tool throughout the remainder of this year. So just an overview of the types of things that have emerged in the roadmap that are new since last year. Now in the next slides, I'll give you a bit of a before and after. So I can't go into sort of each of the individual steps, although certainly if anybody has specific questions, we can try and answer them. But what I'd like to do is give you a bit of a taste of the magnitude, the content that sits underneath any one of these functions and what's changed. So here, to start with, function 1, system coordination, as I said, made up of 5 activities. At the time of the original roadmap, this involved 75 unique steps, covering 177 contributions. So that means that the collective of network operators contributed to 177 actions that were aggregated in some places to 75 unique steps. And the status at the time was that a few steps were completed, a few steps were not currently planned at the time, and most steps were in the implementation phase in light blue on the bottom right diagram, or initiated, meaning that network companies had recognized but not firmly planned the relevant step. Now, if I show you the after view for this, the next slide. There you go. After, we see growth and movement. So what we see is that 75 unique steps became 91 and 177 contributions became 243, and that's because we've administered sort of new steps as I've set out previously. As a result, in the timeline, you can see that some of the functions, principally B, C, and E, I believe, the timeline to complete sort of has moved back because we're adding new steps that are sort of being planned. And we see in the mix, the status mix on the bottom right, we see that sort of a number of steps have been completed. So there's growth from about 7 to 31. So we see movement. Our network companies are making progress. We see again, sort of the largest population is in the implementing and initiated phase, but now this also reflects lots of new steps that have arisen and that are being worked on, as it were. And we see in only a few occasions there are stakeholders that may not be currently planning to execute sort of a given step or a piece of functionality. So that's an overview for function 1. I think I'll quickly step through some of the other functions to give you the idea. Function 2, network operation, 9 underlying activities made up of 47 unique steps and 147 contributions. And again, on bottom right, you see some completed, small number completed, small number not being planned, and the mix is typically between implementing and initiated, the greatest numbers. So if we go to the after view for this function, we see some growth, 54 unique steps now, 165 contributions, and we see a similar mix as one might expect in the implementation status. So I'll do function 3. 4 underlying functions, 4 underlying activities based on 45 unique steps and 151 contributions. Sort of a reasonable number completed, 20 or so, but again, mostly implementing or initiated. We go to the after view. We go from 45 to 64 unique steps. so about a 50% increase. Same thing for the underlying contributions, which go to 225. I think we see good movement in companies and stakeholders completing underlying steps, but again, sort of lots of movement added in the implementation, excuse me, and initiation phase, meaning plenty of work still left to do. Yeah. Function 4, 50 unique steps, 243 contributions across 4 activities. Most or lots of the movement here, of the activity here, has been completed already, but certainly sort of a healthy amount still to be implemented, and some initiated as in being planned. We go to the after view. We see growth again, 72 unique steps, 300 contributions, and again I think we see further movement in steps being completed. So again, I think there's a clear progress here, but much left to do. Function 5, 20 unique steps, 81 contributions across 5 activities, and again this sort of typical mix of completed and implementing and initiated on the bottom right hand side. And as per the most latest information, as we said, no new steps added here. So the number of steps, unique steps and contributions doesn't change, but we do see movement in things, particularly moving from initiated to implementing, meaning that companies are putting sort of a firm and concrete timetable on their delivery of the underlying, as opposed to things having been on the radar previously. Function 6, 7 activities in this function, covered in 90 unique steps and 356 contributions. A lot completed, 142 out of this population, and a balanced remaining view of implementing and initiated. And we go to the after view. So we see a lot of growth here. 90 unique steps became 150 unique steps with 546 contributions. And again, a jump in completed, but also a jump in initiated. So here we've added sort of lots of steps that sort of our network companies now need to sort of take away sort of and plan, specifically sort of a timeline and an implementation plan for. Function 7, 52 unique steps, 208 contributions across 5 functions here. Again, the main activity here sits in the implementing or initiated stage, or it's set anyway, at the middle of last year. And what's happened with this as of today, that's grown to 70 unique steps, 266 contributions, and we see sort of good movement in completing underlying steps, whilst retaining a mix of implementing and initiated steps. So again, lots of work still to do. Charging from memory, we did not add any new steps here. So there's 3 functions in here, although function B doesn't show up because it doesn't currently have an actionable step, which is something I think we'll look into in the next update. 21 unique steps, 51 contributions, 10 or so completed, and much being planned. We go to the after view. Hopefully we see movement. So the number of steps, as I said, stays the same, but we see a slight shift towards completion and actual implementing. So some movement in the charging function as well. So that really is sort of a fast, high-level overview. Again, the objective is mainly to give you an idea of the amount of work that sits underneath these functions and activities. And certainly, hopefully, I hope this demonstrates sort of that our network companies are working hard to implement, all of these activities, solutions, processes that they've identified that are going to deliver DSO for industry. I think that covers what I wanted to say, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Rafik. So everyone's welcome to share any questions that you might have now. At the moment, we haven't had any through. And just a reminder, if you don't think of a question now, you can email our Open Networks usual email address and share your questions that way. Steve, was there anything else you wanted to cover just in terms of next steps at all?
I think the key piece is, I mean, Rafiq's kind of run through the progress that's been made in the implementation plan really well, but I realise that, you know, it's a bit static presenting it like this. I mean, my advice is, you know, if you really want to kind of check that out and interrogate it, please go to the tool and have a play with it and drill down into those areas, and use it to challenge DNOs or question progress, and have a look at you know, where you know, if it's your local DNO that you're interested in, then you know, then contact them. You know, this is very much around visibility, and we want your feedback on that, and you know, with that feedback we can kind of develop this tool and enhance it. We obviously we've got this webinar now, and the tools live. As I said, in Q4 we'll be looking for to add more detail into implementation plan and disaggregating all of the activities according to network. So you'll be able to get more detail yet again. I think you've obviously done a great job, Rafiq, because there's no questions coming through at the moment. I wonder whether rather than, maybe it's the afternoon and type in an effort, if people want to put their hand up, and we'll go straight to them. Ah, there's one there.
Got one there. Would you like me to read that out?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So it would be helpful to understand which worlds are being aimed for within the implementation plans.
So I think in terms of the worlds, as I said, we had a impact assessment that Baringa carried out on the various worlds that we're investigating. Just running through those worlds, it was kind of DSO leads or ESO leads, or DSO and ESO jointly coordinate, and within that that impact assessment decided that the least regret pathway was DNO and ESO jointly coordinates the you know, smart grid of the future for a period of time. And I think if you look at the Ofgem baseline expectations, that reflects that situation. It outlines DNOs performing some DSO tasks. It's clear about the some DSO activities that should be performed by third parties, and there's lots of coordination that's needed between DNOs and ESOs. And I think that's if you talk to the DNOs, we're all working within that framework at the moment, that we're neutral facilitators of the flexibility market, and we should be focused on that. That we should be coordinating with the ESO and looking at whole system decisions and trying to work in that whole system context as much as possible. So I think when you go into the implementation plan, I think you'll see that those activities are within that context.
Great, that seems to have answered the question, and we've had a response to say thank you. Right, I've just sent a reminder, if people would like to ask their questions verbally, do feel free to raise your hand and I can move over to you and announce you. Whilst we're waiting for any final questions, Rafiq, did you have any final words or anything else you'd like to add to Steve's notes as well.
No, I suppose, the question pertaining to the sort of the underlying worlds, I think you'll find it evidenced in the detail of the delivery of the steps and the activities. So certainly it's evident. If I were to comment from my knowledge of the statistics underlying the DSO roadmap, if I were to count sort of the steps that involve the DNOs and the ESO or both, you'll find that that's where most of the activity sits. And I think that reflects what Steve has said. The other answer then is if you look at specific pieces of functionality or processes, for instance, in enabling the coordination between distribution and transmission networks, it's in the execution of that where you find evidence of the execution or the approach of the DNO ESO world. So really, indeed, it's an invitation for any user to go and explore the detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, as we reach the 50-minute mark, so as Steve predicted, under our hour and a half, giving us back the gift of time, it looks like we haven't had any other questions through. So as I said, feel free to email them round. As Steve said, if you want to have a play around with the tool and get to grips with it and then share any questions, do feel free. But other than that, are we all happy to say that that's the end of the webinar and no further updates from the team?
I think that's fine. It's great to have such great attendance today. It's good to see the level of interest in the implementation plan. So hopefully that's reflected in usage now. And bear in mind when you look at that, have in the back of your mind the baseline expectations from Ofgem on DSO, and they're kind of three key areas of planning and network development, network operation, and market development. And I think when you look through the functions that Open Networks kind of came to with stakeholder input, a couple of years ago, you'll see a direct read across in those, and you'd be able to see how those activities are contributing towards those baseline expectations. So thank you from me. Thank you to DMV for their work. They've been a great support during this piece of work, and they're going to continue to contribute to these updates. So that's been really good to have their expertise in that, and thanks to Emily for organising this webinar.
You're very welcome. The slides and the recording will be available very shortly as well. So everyone have a brilliant afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.